Good afternoon, and welcome virtually to the 2020 Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities AGM. My name is Carl Jensen. I'm a councillor with the District of Central Saanich, and I'm also your president for AVICC. I want to welcome the hundreds, thousands of you that are out there watching this. Thank you for tuning in. I recognize this is probably the end of a long day where you've had a number of sessions that you've been watching since early this morning. I want to call our AGM to order. And I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional territories of the Indigenous peoples where our local governments are sitting on and residing on all across the AVICC region. I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity to work, live, and play on these beautiful lands. I was supposed to be delivering this speech from the 71st Convention and Annual General Meeting last April in Nanaimo. However, due to the emergence of the COVID-19 virus and the ensuing pandemic that has gripped the world since, today I'm coming to you as part of the UBCM AGM and Convention. On behalf of AVICC members, I would like to express our appreciation to UBCM for providing us with the virtual platform and the facilities to broadcast this AGM. As a member of the UBCM Convention Committee, I've seen how hard the UBCM staff have worked to pivot to get this convention and voting system up and running. I hope our members will reach out to the UBCM members, their staff, and thank them and provide appreciation. But also, let's ensure that we have some understanding, and if we have the odd little glitch, not to worry. Let's be thankful for the great opportunity we still have to gather virtually for our AGM. I want to give thanks to Gary McIsaac and his team, and a special shout out to Kelsey McKay-Smith, who's the staff support for the Convention Committee, and she has worked tirelessly to give members the ability to meet virtually during this week. At this point, we at AVICC are intending to be in Nanaimo in April of 2021 for what will be our 72nd Convention AGM, but of course that's going to be subject to provincial health guidelines at the time. I'd like to thank the elected officials and staff of the City of Nanaimo and the Regional District for Nanaimo for the work and effort they put into preparations for the 2020 convention, which unfortunately had to be cancelled. At this point, we are proceeding today with the business of our AGM along with the AVICC executive elections for the balance of the 2020-21 term. First of all, I'd like to recognize the exceptional individuals with whom I have served on the AVICC executive. First Vice President, Director Ian Morrison from the Cowichan Valley Regional District. Second Vice President, Director Penny Cote from the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District. Directors at Large, Councillor Hazel Braithwaite from the District of Oak Bay. Councillor Colleen Evans from the City of Campbell River. Councillor Cindy Solda from the City of Port Alberni. Electoral Area Representative, Director Vanessa Craig from the Regional District of Nanaimo. And past President, Director Edwin Grieve, Comox Valley Regional District. I want to give special mention to my colleague, Director Grieve. Edwin has been on the AVICC executive since I joined in 2014. He's been a great mentor and friend, and he has inspired me with his leadership and passion on behalf of the members of the AVICC. Whether it's been leading the AVICC Special Committee on Solid Waste, representing AVICC at the UBCM or FCM board tables, or jumping on stage during our convention to jam with the band on his own guitar, Edwin truly has been a rock star, and his sage wisdom on the executive will be missed. The Union of BC Municipalities are strong partners with AVICC as they advocate with senior levels of government on our behalf. As the AVICC president, I had the privilege this year of being your representative on the UBCM board. Other AVICC members on the executive included UBCM President Mayor Maya Tate from the District of Sauk, Director Travis Hall from the Central Coast Regional District, Councillor Clara Moglove from the City of Campbell River, Councillor Helen Poon from the City of Port Alberni, and Councillor Ben Gesselbrock from the City of Nanaimo. The AVICC was very well represented on the UBCM board this year, and we're fortunate to have such dedicated representation from our region. Now, I want to take a moment and recognize the candidates from AVICC member local governments that have stepped forward to seek a position on the board for the year ahead. Running for third vice president, Councillor Claire Mogla from the City of Campbell River. And running for director at large, Councillor Will Cole-Hamilton from the City of Courtenay. Councillor Charmarc Dubois from the City of Victoria. Councillor Ben Gesselbrock from the City of Nanaimo. Director Travis Hall from the Central Coast Regional District. Councillor Scott Harrison from the town of Qualicum Beach. Mayor Gabby Wickstrom from the town of Port McNeill. And running for small community representative, acclaimed in that position, Councillor Sarah Fowler from the village of Tassis. If you've not already done so, I would encourage you to check out their profiles on the candidate section of the website with the platform, and please don't forget to vote. I would also like to mention some of our members that are serving on committees and boards representing AVACC. First of all, our second Vice President, Director Penny Cote, who sits as our representative on the board of the Municipal Insurance Association of BC. Our first Vice President, Director Ian Morrison, has represented AVACC with the Coastal Communities Social Procurement Initiative. And most recently, I had the opportunity to represent AVACC on the COVID-19 Emergency Working Group for Fisheries, Aquaculture, and Seafood. Another member, Mayor Josie Osborne from the District of Tofino, has continued to represent AVACC on the federal government's Southern Resident Killer Whale Indigenous and Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group. We thank her for her ongoing service in this capacity and for reporting out to the executive. Director Daniel Arbor from the Comox Valley Regional District has also continued to represent AVACC on the DFO's Aquaculture Management Advisory Committee for shellfish. Thanks to Daniel for keeping our executive and membership apprised of his group's work. Daniel and Josie have also represented AVACC on a DFO initiative to enhance aquaculture sustainability in Canada. In the summer of 2019, the DFO has established 3 technical working groups and a coordinating Indigenous and multi-stakeholder body on aquaculture. Josie sits on the Indigenous and multi-stakeholder advisory body, and Daniel is a member of the technical working group for the area-based management. Minutes and reports from both of these groups are posted on the AVACC website under the page on representatives on external groups. A new initiative this year for AVACC is that we put a call out to our members on behalf of UBCM who had offered free convention admission to the youth that would be interested in attending. And I'm very excited to announce that we have had the following youths nominated by their respective local governments, and they are joining us for the convention, and they're here today as well. Charlotte Taylor from the City of Nanaimo, Brody Eldridge from the village of Tassis, and finally Lister Divitre from the village of Cumberland. It's fantastic to see youths like this in our communities that are taking an interest in local government. And hopefully, we're going to see them and maybe some of their friends on the ballots in 2022. If you can manage to catch them online, say hello and make them feel like at home, because we're greatly appreciative for them to be here. Talking a little bit about priorities for AVACC in 2019 and 2020. The full report is in our annual report, which you can find online, but I wanted to highlight a couple of points for you today. We were able to secure the release of just over $40,000 that we've been holding in trust from the Treaty Advisory Committee meetings held in 2000. And we're looking forward to using these funds for future reconciliation activities within the association. We sent letters this year to 55 First Nations within the AVACC area, extending an invitation to them to join the AVACC. We've advocated on behalf of our members with correspondence to Dr. Bonnie Henry, the Honourable Claire Trevina, and BC Ferries. Members can view the correspondence on the AVACC website under the page Correspondence and Advocacy. We've continued to lead the AVACC Special Committee on Solid Waste Management since 2015. And finally, to increase transparency in our work on behalf of our 53 members, we've redesigned the AVACC website to make it more accessible on mobile devices and tablets, and we've added more content in the way of reports and correspondence. The new website has a search function that makes it easier to find that old information you're looking for. We also have a What's New section listing the new posts and activities and happenings. If you have not yet checked it out, I would encourage you to take a look at avacc.ca. In terms of resolutions, the resolutions that were submitted prior to the deadline for our April convention have been forwarded to UBCM for consideration at this convention. under resolutions which were deemed regional in nature by the UBCM have been referred back to the AVICC executive for consideration. And I want to thank Claire Moglov, chair of the UBCM Resolutions Committee, for her work, and she will be guiding us through the virtual resolutions debate tomorrow. We've had a number of AVICC members, past and present, who have sadly passed away during the last year, and I wanted to take a moment to recognize them for the contributions that they've made to their local governments and communities that they've served. Brenda Parkinson, councillor from the District of Sauk. Gillian Trumper, former mayor, City of Port Alberni. Clark Gourlay, director with the Regional District of Nanaimo, Area G. B. Holland, former councillor from the City of Victoria. Dorothy Bart, councillor from the District of Tofino. Eric Simons, former councillor from the City of Victoria. And Sheila Beach, former councillor from the District of Sauk. My sincere apologies if I missed any members that have passed in the past year. Finally, in conclusion, I would like to say that it has been an honor to serve the 53 AVICC local governments since 2014 when I first joined the executive. I've been fortunate to venture out into most of your communities, from Tofino to Port Hardy, with some time spent along the way in places like Tassis and Powell River. We are very fortunate to be able to call such a beautiful portion of this province our home. The work of AVICC over the 2019-2020 term has been yet another great tribute to the phenomenal team and staff in all of the local governments across our association. Finally, I want to acknowledge AVICC's Secretary-Treasurer Liz Cookson for all of her hard work supporting the association and all of its members. I also want to thank Gary McIsaac and his fantastic UBCM staff for all of the support they provide at our conventions. Hopefully we get to have them in person again one day and throughout the year. I've learned that the key to success in local governments is partnerships, and we greatly value our partnership with UBCM. We look forward to serving our members through 2020-2021, and we welcome your input. I will close that portion and say stay safe, everyone, and we hope to see you in Nanaimo in April. Now, we're going to move on to the business portion of the meeting. But first, I want to let members know that FortisBC has been a sponsor of today's AGM. You'll remember that at our conventions in persons, FortisBC usually has a booth with a draw in support of nonprofit organizations. FortisBC will be reaching out to AVICC communities to share an update and information on their 30 by 30 commitment, and they will invite you to enter an online draw for a $1,500 donation that FortisBC will make to a local food bank. AVICC will be using a portion of sponsorship money to match FortisBC's donation. Carmen, the Regional Communities Relations Manager, will be at the FortisBC virtual trade show booth on Wednesday morning from 8:30 to 10:30 and Thursday from 10:30 to 1. Connect with her there or keep an eye out for her for the update and the draw entry. So thank you to FortisBC for their ongoing support. Now, the voting for the Director-at-Large positions ended at noon today, and I will be announcing the results a little later in the agenda. First, we have the usual business of the AGM that we'd like to work through, such as adopting last year's AGM minutes and receiving the financial statements. I should mention that we are holding our AGM under the authority of a temporary change in the BC Emergency Program Act that allows electronic meetings during the province's state of emergency. We have 4 items on the business portion of the agenda: to adopt the minutes from last year's AGM, then to receive the annual report, and to receive the audited financial statements and the 2020 budget. We normally pass these items with a show of hands at our convention, but given we're going virtual this year and we do have our votes, we have to do our votes through the online voting platform, I'm proposing we pass the motions through unanimous consent today. Now, this means that you only need to let us know if you oppose the motion. You can use the chat box to report your opposition. Now, these motions typically require a simple majority to pass. If the majority aren't opposed, I will declare the motion carried. If members want to have an electronic vote on each motion, we have that option to fall back on. But recognizing we're at the end of a long day of sessions that we've all been staring at our phones, tablets, laptops, big screen TVs, I'm going to recognize that we have the ability, and I'm going to suggest with the history of these motions and how they are usually passed with very little dialogue, I'm going to propose and suggest that we move these 4 motions as a block today to move us through the agenda. So I would now seek a motion to move all 4 motions as a block. I've got it moved by Ian Morrison and seconded by Mayor Tate. I will now go to see if there are any oppositions through the chat box. Okay, seeing no objections, I'm going to declare the block of motions carried, and those motions are approved. Thank you. You saved yourself a bunch of more talking from Carl, so well done. Now, the election results. I want to thank you for your patience with the voting process. I hope that next year we're going to be able to go back to those hand votes and standing votes and all of that good stuff again if we're lucky. This is the last formal item on the AGM, is announcing the results of the election for Director at Large. I would like to thank past President Edwin Grieve for acting as our chair for the nominating committee. He would have loved to have been here with me to announce the results, but it wasn't recommended under the current public health guidelines. After our AGM was postponed from April, the executive chose to reopen the nomination period in July. When the second nomination period closed, the following AVSCC executive members were unopposed and were acclaimed in their positions on the 2020-2021 AVSCC executive at the conclusion of the AGM. President Ian Morrison, Director of Cowichan Valley Regional District. First Vice President Penny Cote, Director with the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District. Second Vice President Hazel Braithwaite, Councillor with the District of Oak Bay. Electoral Area Representative Vanessa Craig, Director with the Regional District of Nanaimo. But you're all thinking, we already knew that stuff. They want to get to the vote. All right, here it is. After the second nomination period, we had 6 candidates running for 3 positions of Director at Large. Voting for the candidates opened yesterday morning at 9 a.m. and closed today at noon. I would like to thank all of the members who put their names forward to serve as volunteers on the executive. The successful candidates for Director at Large were Councillor Colleen Evans from the City of Campbell River, Director Mark Gisborne, Quathot Regional District, and Director Travis Hall from the Central Coast Regional District. Congratulations to those 3 and all members of the election. Through this, I want to acknowledge the voter turnout for this was 75%. So well done, AVACC. Not only did we lead in terms of candidates on the UBCM ballot, but we continue to lead the charge and show everybody else how it's done. I want to thank everybody for stepping forward. I want to thank you for voting. And finally, I want to thank our scrutineer for the results today. Paul Murray, acting CEO from the District of Central Saanich, oversaw the voting process to ensure that it was within our guidelines for our bylaws. Now, I would like to call upon Maya Tate, Mayor of the District of Sauk and UBCM President, to address our members today. Now, before I hand it over to Maya, I'd like to say personally how much I've enjoyed working with her on the UBCM executive and thank her on behalf of the members for her hard work and dedication on behalf as UBCM President. Please welcome Maya Tate.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I wish to thank everyone who is engaging in this online convention. It truly takes adoption by everyone, both in terms of production as well as in participation. We thank all of you for your patience as we evolve our process. Given what we're hearing from the medical community, this may not be our last online AGM. Just saying. Not taking any bets, though. I wish to take a moment now to acknowledge our AVICC President, Carl Jensen. Councillor Jensen brings a strong and practical perspective to our UBCM table, and it has been wonderful to serve alongside him. Always prepared, professional, and present for meetings, he brings kindness, compassion, and focus to all the work that we do. And he's so quick to get all of our messages out on Twitter. It's unreal. I also wish to acknowledge and thank all of our AVICC members who are finishing up their term with UBCM. As Carl mentioned, we have Councillor Moglove, Councillor Poon, Director Hall, and Councillor Gesselbracht. Thank you so much for all of your work. And further, what a great turnout from AVICC for the UBCM executive. Good luck to all of the candidates and delegates. Remember that the voting portal is now live and open, so remember to log in and vote. UBCM is a diverse membership, and while there is much we have in common with local governments in other regions, we also have a unique perspective on some issues as coastal communities. You can see that in some of the specialized work between AVICC and UBCM over the years, like our analysis on the socioeconomic impacts of funding cuts to BC ferries. This has been an extremely challenging year for all of us. The level of coordination with the province and the responsiveness by councils and boards to the dynamics of the pandemic have truly been impressive. Our convention provides an opportunity for us to gather and to check in on issues that we are dealing with at home and how we can face them together. This is an opportunity now to step back and to evaluate where we all come from and what the road ahead looks like. I have so much appreciation for all of my elected colleagues and for the work you're doing in your home communities to sustain and to build them all. You are such inspiring leaders. I thank all of you and your staff for the commitment to service excellence, and I thank you for this opportunity to join with you in the AVICC annual AGM. I'll see you in Nanaimo. Thank you. Oh, that's for me? Okay. How do you take the flag? Thank you, Carl.
Thank you very much, UBCM President Tate, for being here with us today and sharing those kind words. Next, I would like to turn it over to First Vice President, incoming President, Director Ian Morrison.
Thank you, Carl, and welcome to everyone that's here today. And I'm thrilled to be able to stand before you and introduce our important session today, and just note that there was some discussion about perhaps we should be having some discussions about island health and bringing information to you about that today. But as it turns out, we've got a lineup today that I think is going to be very important given the times ahead. And today we have to present to you Danita Welch from UBCM, Manager of Local Government Programs and Services, Brent Felker, also from UBCM, Gas Tax Policy and Program Manager, and Brian Bedford from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, who's the Director of Local Government Infrastructure and Finance. I think all of us would agree that where we get our dollars from in these times in the future is very important, and they're going to bring some information to present to you to explore that further. Just wanted to note that it's been a very long day, and while we have the ability to pose questions to our presenters, it has been a long day, and we thought that given that most of our staff are very well connected with the people presenting to us today, that if there are no questions, we may have the ability to wrap up a little bit early today. But we do have the technology, and the presenters are prepared to answer questions if they come in through the chat portion of this technology. So with that, I'm going to first invite up to speak to you Danita. Danita, please.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Director Morrison, for having us here today. I'm going to start with a very quick overview of how we do granting through local government program services. Generally speaking, we administer all of the provincially funded grants for UBCM. We are committed to transparent processes. So what we mean by that is we try to put out very clear program guides that give the information around how we assess applications, how we make decisions. We were a little bit slowed down in the spring due to the pandemic, but we do commit to, generally speaking, 90 days to turn around applications to get responses back to communities. Our application processes are fairly streamlined. I joke that we try to go for 10 questions or less on our forms, but we really do try to keep them short and sweet. In terms of timing, most of our programs have intakes over the fall and winter. Usually means by about September until about March is when you'll see most of the application intakes happen for our programs. And then again, the adjudication would follow, typically getting us into the spring. For any communities that have current projects that are funded through LGPS, just a flag and a reminder, we are trying to be as flexible as possible in terms of any community or project that's been impacted by COVID-19. So certainly be in touch with our program officers if you are a community that has been funded and you need a bit more time to either finish your project or get your final report in. I'll continue by highlighting the funding programs that we're currently accepting applications. So we have a number, again, running right up until December. The FireSmart Community Funding and Supports Program, which is our main wildfire funding program. Some of you may recall we used to have funding under what was called SWIPE. That has changed a couple years ago. Sorry, it seems like the slides are moving a bit here, but we'll try to get them back. We'll try to get them back to where we need them to be. It's a very successful program. We are looking forward to many applications coming in for the first week of October for that program. Housing Needs Reports program will be our second intake this fall, so we are expecting that to be the final intake for the program. So if you've not applied yet, this would certainly be the time to do that. Active transportation planning, very excited to work with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to provide a new funding program this year. So this will be our first intake, looking for applications that help communities embed active transportation into other types of planning processes they may already have underway. So something like an OCP and adding a lens of active transportation. The next two are part of our overall Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, so the Evacuation Route Planning Program. This will be the second intake for that program. Again, it's planning focused. We're not building or funding actual evacuation routes, but certainly the planning that needs to go into that process is what is eligible under that program. And then we will be doing another intake for structural flood mitigation. We have postponed that intake. It was originally planned for October, but we've backed it up a little bit. It will now have a deadline in mid-November. And then finally, our Community Forum program, which is one of our longest running programs at UBCM, will have its final intake for the 2020-21 fiscal year in the beginning of December. Yesterday morning, not too long before the election was announced, we did receive confirmation that we will be continuing funding for 3 of our additional funding streams under the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. So all 3 of the flood risk assessment, mapping and mitigation, the emergency support services, and the emergency operations centers and training program, all of which have been very popular with members across the province, will be coming back for an additional intake. We haven't set the actual dates yet, and the materials are not out, but they will be out, I'm hoping as soon as next week. And you will see we have at least established the months for those intakes, just not the final days that those will be available. And then the Poverty Reduction Planning and Actions Program, we have committed with working with the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction to a second intake. Again, we haven't set the date for that deadline, but we are expecting, I would guess, February or March for that to be set, but more info will be coming on that very soon. And then finally, some of the perennial programs we've been running for quite some time at UBCM that we've not established future intake dates for, but we are working with the associated ministries to continue those programs. So we are hoping that we will have funding renewed for the Age-Friendly program, for our Asset Management Planning program, and also to continue the Community Forum program. So certainly look for announcements over the fall and into the early winter about the future of those programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Danita. Next, we will have Brent come up and speak to you about his area of expertise next. Thank you.
Thank you. Just want to start out by saying that the other two presenters might be talking a bit about some active grants that are opening. Fortunately for gas tax, we do not have any current intakes open. I just wanted to get that out there at the front. However, I wanted to take this opportunity to speak to some of the changes that have occurred over the last 6 months, both from the federal government as the funder of the gas tax fund and UBCM as the program administrator in response to the COVID pandemic. I also want to touch on where I see the gas tax fund program moving over the next few years as communities are planning for economic recovery measures. Just to give you a short overview of the gas tax program in BC, the gas tax fund provides long-term predictable funding for local governments for investments in community infrastructure priorities. It's a federal transfer of $2.2 billion nationally, annually, across Canada. In British Columbia, that translates to about $280 million plus per year. And over the term of the gas tax program, it will see the federal transfer over $4.5 billion to BC between 2005 to 2024 for community infrastructure projects. This program, as of today, has reported spending on over 6,200 projects in British Columbia that directly benefit local governments. UBCM administers the program on behalf of the province, and we have been administering the program since 2005. One other point is we're currently in year 7, or going into year 7 of a 10-year funding commitment by the federal government, which commits funding straight through to 2024. So the next slide really talks about the program delivery model for the gas tax fund. That the top is the gas tax fund is at $280+ million. We deliver 3 distinct program funding streams out of that 280. One that is probably most relevant to everyone is the Community Works Fund, or CWF. The CWF sees the direct allocation to each local government in BC twice a year, typically in July and November. The Community Works Fund program is a flexible program. It allows for investments in a number of capital project categories, and it's based on the principles of local government autonomy and decision-making. So in short, local governments are the decision makers, and they make localized choices on how to best utilize the funds based on an eligible category list for investments such as roads, active transportation, water, wastewater, solid waste, recreation infrastructure, to name a few. This program sees the delivery of about $110 million annually to local governments, and it's based on a per capita allocation with a funding floor. So every local government in British Columbia is part of this program. We also administer, could we go back one slide? Thanks. We also administer 2 other funding streams with the Gas Tax Fund, the Strategic Priorities Fund, and the Greater Vancouver Regional Fund. I won't speak to the Greater Vancouver Regional Fund, but the Strategic Priorities Fund is our application-based competitive program, which we ran in 2015 and 2017 for large regional innovative projects. At this point, we have committed all of our funds towards the Strategic Priorities Fund program, and we do not have a timeline for a future intake unless should more money come available from the federal government. So we can go next slide, thanks. So I guess the last slide, I just want to talk a little bit about changes to programming for program administration since COVID. Most significantly and well documented was the acceleration of the 2020 community or gas tax transfer. What that meant is UBCM received the entire amount in June of 2020, and we in turn turned that around and delivered it by July to each local government in a Community Works Fund payment. This accelerated payment, coupled with last year's one-time double top-up payment of gas tax funds, saw each local government within a 12-month period receive a significant amount of community works funding. From an administrative side, I really am echoing Danita's comments that as administrators, we look to provide as much flexibility to grant management as we could, and we offered on a case-by-case consideration of extending completion dates for projects, knowing that communities, some communities and some projects might have been put on pause or on hold over the last 6 months. So finally, I guess the good news is for the gas tax program is I really do not see this funding program being negatively impacted over the next few years due to current spending. I think that the Community Works Fund funding model will be at least as it is straight through to 2023-24 and potentially beyond once we start discussing the next round of gas tax programming. So I'll leave it there, and thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Brant. And I would just remind all of you watching today that if you do have questions, we do have the capability to pose those questions in the chat box, but I think I'm going to rely on you to use your discretion. We can all reach out to our presenters offline, but if you are so inclined, you can enter a question and it will be answered. I will now ask our Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing guest, who was a bit of a late addition to the lineup, but we're thrilled to have him here given all that's going on. I'd invite Brian to come up and speak to you about his area of expertise. Brian.
Thank you, Ian. Just wanted to acknowledge that we're speaking, I know everybody else is spread around virtually, but we're speaking here on the territory of the Kwanghan-speaking people of the Esquimalt Mountain Songhees First Nation. I also need to acknowledge right off the bat that I need to focus on the conversation today on what's actively available from the Ministry's infrastructure programs. As some of you may have noticed, there was a change yesterday. So, with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, we administer a number of different funding programs. Some of you may have projects active under past programs such as the Small Communities Fund or the Clean Water Wastewater Fund, or planning work under the Infrastructure Planning Grant Program. But currently, I'll focus on the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, or ICIP for an acronym for you. It is a 10-year bilateral agreement between the province and Canada, Infrastructure Canada specifically, that has 4 core streams within it. It flows funding to public transit, so for TransLink and BC Transit around the province, as well as a set of streams that are more community-focused, in which they have application intakes, reviews, and approvals for individual projects. So currently, we have the Community Culture and Recreation intake open. It opened earlier this summer. It has a deadline coming up soonest on October 1st, 2020. There's approximately $100 million available in that intake for project approvals. And for local governments, it represents a cost share of 73.3% towards your total eligible cost on project funding. So one thing about the Investing in Canada program, ICIP, it's changed the old funding formula from the past. For many years, we ran funding formulas on the one-third, one-third, one-third cost share. So here we have an increased cost share coming from the senior governments, and this is consistent through the programs. Community Culture and Rec is, of course, focused on increased access to or quality of your community services, recreation services throughout. So we've seen projects along the lines of trails, be them multi-use trails or other recreational trails, community centers, rec centers, and more. So that program is open to all local governments in the province. Rural and northern communities also has an intake open at the moment. It is a bit more narrow in focus as far as applicants. It is local government focused. However, it's got a population cap to identify those that are more, of course, talking to AVICC here, more rural rather than north. So communities that are eligible to apply have a population of 25,000 or less, and there's a cost share change here. So for those that are between 5,001 and 25,000, you can get up to 90% funding towards your project. For communities 5,000 and under, you can get up to 100% funding. The other benefit for rural and north is the broad number of categories, which I'll come to in a second. As you can see on the slide, its deadline is October 22nd, and there's approximately $58 million available in that intake. In this case, rural and north has a set of specific categories that are only eligible under this stream. Increased access and speed with broadband and internet connectivity. There's a food security component. There's also increased access to your community, whether through marine, air, or road. A focus on energy efficiency and or energy reliability for the community. And another one with respect to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission outcomes with health and education facilities. In addition to these core outcomes for rural and north are all the other outcomes under the Investing in Canada program. So the environmental quality stream, focused on drinking water and wastewater, are also eligible, as are disaster mitigation, the outcomes under community culture and rec, as well as the outcomes under Clean BC, which we'll be talking to in a minute, as well as public transit. So it has quite a broad range of projects, much more in line with the breadth that you see under the gas tax program. Again, closes on October 22nd. It's coming up soon. Now we'll leave it at that for that one. If we go to the next slide. The Clean BC Communities Fund, also a stream. It sits underneath the green infrastructure stream of the larger ICIP program. Has approximately $47 million available for this intake. Its deadline is November 12th, 2020. And it is focused on, as you can see in the title, well, not as much in the title as it could have been. However, it's about energy and GHG reductions. So projects that increase capacity to manage renewable energy or increase generation of clean energy, increased access to clean energy transportation, for example, charging stations for electric cars, and increased energy efficiency to buildings. There's a little asterisk on that, buildings. Pretty much any local government building you own except your municipal hall. That's one policy piece that's in there that comes from our federal friends that doesn't have a wiggle room. Nonetheless, it does offer a fair bit of breadth, as well as the ability to do projects such as energy and waste heat recapture from your wastewater systems and other. Finally, it too drops back to the 73.33% cost share for local governments. Finally, I thought I'd mention the environmental quality program, noting that the intake is not currently open, but some of you may have projects that are currently under review with that project program, which had an intake that closed earlier this year. There's approximately $150 million available in that intake. It has as well the 73.33% cost share, focused on drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater, as well as soil and air pollution management. The programs are all available for more detail on the website listed on the slide. As well, the team at Municipal Affairs is always available to answer questions about new projects, project applications, or project underway. As far as timelines, because the programs operate on a long-term timeline, we'll see minimal impact at the moment. Currently, you'll notice, if you do look at the website, that environmental quality has an anticipated final decisions coming from our federal partners in spring of 2021, and the other three that we discussed today have a final decision in summer of 2021. So thank you for your time today. Again, access to answer questions. If there aren't any coming through the chat, there's plenty of program leads available at the ministry to help discuss your projects, and contacting them through the email provided will get you connected to the correct person. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Brian. So we get to this part whether we will have a question and answer segment, and I'm looking to our fantastic UBCM and AVICC staff, and it appears at this point that you've heard our call and there are no questions for our guests, and we all thank you for that. You can also reach out and have your staff or yourselves reach out to our presenters, and their information will be provided. I just want to take this moment to thank all of our guests, Brent, Danita, and Brian, for coming, and we do have a small token of our appreciation for coming. We will present you with a card and one of our coveted AVICC Penn. So thank you very much for coming. We very much appreciate your attendance here today. And that takes us to the closing remarks for today's event. We are a little bit ahead of schedule, and I'm sure a lot of you can appreciate that. It's been a long day, and we appreciate all of your tenacity in going through today's event. I want to start, and I'm smiling now because this is a bit of the fun part of the meeting, because I have to follow a pretty great guy, great leader, and fun guy in himself, in Carl Jensen. And I want to take a moment here to just acknowledge how fantastic it has been to work with Carl throughout this year and in previous years on the AVICC executive. Now, he doesn't get off that easy. We need him here as our immediate past president and will be a regular contributor and participant in our meetings in the year ahead. Thank you, Carl. You've been a great inspiration. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I also now want to take the moment, and this is kind of a fun part too, to acknowledge our new executive. We will, of course, have Carl as past president, myself, Penny, Hazel, Vanessa, Colleen, Mark, and Travis. And I don't know if you noticed, but we have a perfectly gender-neutral executive. And that's a great thing to see, and I'm looking forward to the advice and the input of all of those that are serving on this executive for the year ahead. 75% voter turnout from our members, I think that's fantastic. And now I want to just get into a little bit about the year ahead. And if you think about it, Carl had a pretty tough gig because he went from an executive that was under pretty normal circumstances. I don't know if he got much opportunity to travel to some of the other area associations. We had some in-person executive meetings, and then COVID-19 hit. Travel stopped, in-person meetings stopped. So the year ahead, I'm going to have to rely on Carl a little bit because I don't think there'll be the travel. I won't get the opportunity to visit nearly as much as previous presidents have. It will be an unprecedented year. It'll be unprecedented because most of our work is going to be done virtually and electronically. So where we might have had scheduled a number of meetings throughout the year, they will all be done electronically, and it'll be a little different format for our executive to operate in the year ahead. So where do we go from here? Well, we all have the means to reach out to the brand new executive, to our AVICC staff and our UBCM staff. Reach out and pose those questions. Talk to us about those challenges and those difficulties that you may have. We're here to serve the membership. I think Carl might have mentioned in his remarks that we are a society of members. We're not a local government. And our executive, I know, is excited and enthusiastic about getting down to the work of serving each and every one of our local government representatives. That's what we have for the year ahead. We will be in service of you, and I look forward to hearing from so many of you with your issues and concerns and your good news stories as well. It looks like we have some funding opportunities in our near future that may help us to better serve each and every one of our individual communities. And I want to end speaking of service. And this is kind of sad, but kind of good news too. In this past year, we've had the retirement of someone that you all have learned to know and love. And that's the former director from the Cowichan Valley Regional District representing Electoral Area H, Director Mary Marcotte. Mary has resigned from office, and yet Mary was such a great individual, great elected official who served as a Cowichan Valley Regional District Board Chair. She served in every position on the AVICC executive. I believe she put in 25 years serving her community. Now, I bring this up specifically because I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for Mary Marcotte. Mary has been my leader, my mentor, and really one of my best friends in my dozen years as an elected official. And if it wasn't for Mary and her great spirit, I don't think many of us would have had the great time that we have had in our previous conventions. And I say the previous conventions because we all know Mary liked to dance. So while Mary may have retired from serving her community, I sure hope she doesn't retire her dancing shoes. So with that, I will sign off and adjourn today's meeting. Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you in the year ahead. Thank you.